recognize the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I am pleased to have this opportunity again to get a few thoughts on the record about Bill 136, the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, abbreviated PAWS, which, as I have said before, is clever, and I give full marks for having a clever title for the bill. And as we have heard throughout the debate from both sides of the House, that we do have agreement that this is an important piece of legislation, that the, I will say, meat and potatoes of it, so to speak, are there. But as I had said in my previous remarks, I had 20 minutes opportunity to speak to this, that there are things that we wanted to flag for this government that we do hope, despite the truncated turnaround time from when it goes to committee and comes out the other side, we do hope that those who have been paying attention to this debate have taken some of those suggestions, not just to heart, but to those who can perhaps put them into the regulations or put the suggestions forward when it comes to clause by clause in committee. Because there are opportunities in this specific piece of legislation where we can put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, specifically about funding, or where we can ensure that the priorities that we have, that we see before us in this bill about training and the training of inspectors, that we actually flesh out what that means, and we don't leave it quite so loosey-goosey, that we actually make sure that it is prescribed, that the training is what it needs to be to not only keep our animals safe and protected, but to ensure that when charges are laid and matters come before the courts, that they aren't then thrown out because there isn't enough to go on because there was a problem during the investigations. So as we've seen time and time again with the OSPCA. And I'll bring it back that this this particular piece of legislation is replacing the OSPCA Amendment Act, which was the interim act implemented in June of 2019, and that was after the courts had decided in January that the OSPCA, which is a private charity exercising police-like powers, but without the important required layer of public accountability, that was deemed to be unconstitutional. So we have talked about the history of how we got here and how, unfortunately, we have had a time where animals didn't have the level of protection that they needed and deserved, but we stand here continuing to debate this legislation, which will eventually become the law of the land, and hopefully is going to be more than the framework legislation, is going to be effective legislation. So we know why this is important. This has been a very, in parts, warm and fuzzy debate. You know, it has been kind and gentle in some ways. It has been very nice, and folks have shared about their pets, and that is a nice opportunity for us as legislators to kind of get to know a little bit more about each other. You know, I could tell you about Casey, my first family dog that ran through our backyard, and my mother said, "Ooh, I want to have that dog." What a beautiful dog. And the dog came back and was just doing laps around the neighborhood, and when my mother went out to greet this rambunctious mutt, he had a little tag around his neck that said, "Want me? Call," or, you know, "If you want me, call this number." And there was a phone number, and she called, and it was a construction site dog, one that had been hanging around the construction site and was being fed by the construction workers. And when this job was over, nobody knew what to do with this hang-around dog. Well, we took him, called the number, and they showed up with a bag of dog food and a leash. And Casey, with all of his bad habits, he didn't just eat construction site food, he ate really everything that was none of his business, I'll tell you. But Casey was my very first dog, and I didn't get to share about Casey before, so I'm glad to do that. We had Casey and Smudge when I was a little girl, little cat, who, lots of stories about Smudge. Smudge didn't like me at all. And that was totally undeserved. But Smudge liked my brother, who sat still and wasn't, rambunctious. So there you have it. That was the start of my pet journey. But we have shared those stories, and people across the province are very passionate about their pets, about their family members that can't write us letters and can't pick up the phone and call and can't run for office but still deserve representation. So we are here on behalf of the animals across the province, not only pets, of course, but all animals. So we know why we care. We've heard horrible stories as well. So we've had the warm and fuzzy connecting moments, and we've had the very hard to handle and hard to listen to stories and details of court cases and of abuse around the province that just guts you to imagine how anyone can do harm in the ways that we've heard in this legislature. And I think having all of this information, the need to protect and the need to hold people to account if bad things happen to good animals, we really need to make sure that this legislation does what it needs to do. Because if you're going to do it, you need to do it right. And I have spoken, and I actually had a side conversation with the Attorney General after debate and said, hey, what I was trying to get across about the need for prohibition or restitution to be language in regulation, this is what I meant by that. Because I'm hopeful that we will see that in the final version of this bill, or that we will see that in regulations after the final version of this bill, that people who do bad things to animals shouldn't be allowed to have them anymore. Why can't we have prohibitions that must be considered above and beyond the penalty or the fines, and also restitution, that paying for damages, because as I said in my last debate, it almost offends to think of a pet as property, but in the eyes of the law, they are. So if someone were to break my window, they'd have to pay me damages. But if someone were to hurt my animal and I have to take my pet to the vet, it isn't in regulations necessary, or that restitution doesn't have to be paid, that isn't necessarily a consideration. So that was one piece for the government, I hope, to consider. When we talk about training, Chief Animal Welfare Inspector, it has laid out the duties of the Chief Animal Welfare Inspector to ensure that animal welfare inspectors receive appropriate training respecting their powers and duties. What the heck is appropriate, and who gets to define it? I asked that question before, and I want to make sure that they get real training, like real training, because, Speaker, we see the police get constant ongoing training, right? They are out in our communities, and when they have to, they lay charges, and more often than not, well, I think more often than not, those charges stick, right? That the courts have what they need because the investigations were done appropriately. But what we have seen with the OSPCA, whether they will admit this or not, we've seen time and time and time again that those charges have to be basically thrown out because they don't hold water, maybe because there had been a human rights violation along the way, that there had been something improper or incorrect or problematic during the investigation stuff. So I think the level of training for inspectors has to, I've said hold water a couple times, but I can't think of a better expression, but that's what I'm trying to say. I want to read something from Lynn Perrier, who is with Reform Advocates for Animal Welfare, or abbreviated RAW. So she says this: the biggest problem we are going to face is with the new investigators all being ex-OSPCA dog catchers. They will bring the same mindset to the job as before, ignoring animals at risk and terrorizing innocent owners. Their abuse of power seems to go with the job, end quote. Well, Speaker, I'll say that's fairly strong language. But the sentiment is even stronger, and the view of the animal rights community and the advocacy community is that they have many examples of reasons that they do not and have not trusted the OSPCA, and they feel very, very nervous to see the same leadership steering, at the helm of this new ship. And I don't want to defame anyone, so I won't. I won't talk about all of the. I won't read all of the emails and examples that I've been given, but there have been a number of cases brought against the OSPCA, and I challenge the government, who has talked extensively about certain individuals who were involved with the OSPCA and they're making that transition, make sure that they have the training that is appropriate for this piece of legislation and these goals, because otherwise I don't know how the direction can be that different. So I do challenge the government to make sure that the training happens, that everyone knows what it is that they are responsible for. There's a level of training for Crown attorneys that will be required, I think, that goes with this. Again, with regulations, we still don't know what this is going to look like, whether the regulations will be in place in less than a month and a half for that January 1st rollout. And how will we be sure that inspectors will be trained and ready for this rollout? So again, some reassurances that we would like to see. Time allocation, we've had that conversation in this room. It's 7 hours for folks to come and speak, and that's 7 hours in 10-minute presentations with time for questions and comments. But by my math, according to the time allocation, allows for 14 deputations, right? So if it's 7 hours and you've got 30 minutes per deputation, quick math on that is 14 folks. So I hope that we're not forced to turn people away at committee, because I think that really is the time, as we know, to gather those opinions. You've allowed for it here. It's limited. We've talked about that. There's a bit of he said with the House leaders. I wasn't in that room. But I do hope that this legislation comes out the other side with the time and attention that it deserves, because our animals deserve no less. Thank you.